Chapter 2. The Shifting of Eras. We cannot change anything unless we accept it. Condemnation does not liberate, it oppresses. C.G. Jung. A Romanian folk song danced off the strings of a battered violin outside the door of Shakespeare and Sons bookstore of Berlin, nestled in the Prenzlauer Berg neighborhood. The musician was hired to attract theater-goers to the performance that evening. But since the house was already full, he turned his attention to entertaining those without tickets, standing outside in the late summer breeze. It had been 20 years since I submitted my last play for production, Bite Your Tongue, which was being readied for tonight's performance. Long ago, it had been so harshly and immediately rejected that I left the theater world. The play is a comedy about an exuberant group of high school students from an all-white cowboy community in a remote corner of Oregon who pick August Wilson's Pulitzer Prize-winning play Fences for the school's spring theatrical production. A young drama teacher, fresh out of college and in her first job, is easily persuaded by the students on the literary and social merits of the play. The teacher tries to fend off cultural appropriation and bring respect and dignity to the performance by requiring her students receive formal instruction using Green's African American Vernacular English, AVE, and Dillard's Black English grammar texts. Although struggling, the students enthusiastically dive into the grammar with commitment and dedication. Soon, their practice bubbles beyond the confines of the school and onto the cow paths of their small conservative community. Of course, all hell breaks loose. The white community in Bite Your Tongue struggles with the idea of racism by mistakenly believing it could not apply to them since no black person has ever visited their community. The play addresses America's collective refusal to acknowledge its most crippling social ailment. More fundamentally, it answers the social call in reaching toward a solution to unite a fractured nation through storytelling. The idea for the play came to me while watching massive protests in Compton, California, over the school board's controversial proposal to teach AVE grammar and structure as part of language curriculum. It came during a wave of Black student activism seeking Black studies programs be offered at the college and high school level. The Compton School Board was considering the benefit to their students of being taught in their native variety of English as a legitimate, grammatically correct language, and then use it to teach them standard English. The proposal failed. I knew the play was edgy for the 1990s when it was, and it remains still, strictly unacceptable for white Americans to speak AVE, but especially when even Black Americans were not allowed to speak it in school. But I thought it was time to open the conversation on how even remote white cowboy culture is shaped by urban Black culture, and how white Americans can transform their dread of guilt into pride for having overcome it. As touchy as the subject was, I thought the world was ready for it because this was a comedy about overcoming racial paralysis. I envisioned it would be brought to the stage in the hands of a Black director and crew, who would in turn collaborate with the mostly white cast. I was brutally mistaken. Without even reading the script, the artistic director of the Portland Black Repertory Theater bluntly, abruptly rejected just the concept of it, saying, "No Black director in the country will touch this." Her words instantly vaporized my excitement and vision for this play, as well as all hope for my future in the theater. That I was suggesting a Black theater company produce a story written by a white playwright, performed by white actors, and conveying a white point of view on race was far too extreme for such a delicate and painful social issue of the moment. My attempt to tackle the race problem revealed me as just another clumsy, foolishly ignorant white person with good intentions doing more damage than good. In the flash of a moment, what had been an exciting idea suddenly morphed into a horrific social faux pas, one ending my future on the stage. I crept home in a state of intense shame, threw the script into a brown paper grocery bag, wrapped it tightly with far too much masking tape, and threw it on a low shelf in a dark corner of the attic to disappear under years of dustfall and mouse droppings. 20 years later, a ghost rose from the dust. My husband secretly submitted Bite Your Tongue to the Berlin International Literary Festival during a season of play performances on a theme of racism. He didn't tell me the play was accepted until after the director, cast, and venue had been decided and the schedule of rewrites drafted. I was horrified. My husband thought it was perfect. Outside the bookstore where it was all about to happen, I dropped a handful of coins into the fiddle player's case and made a wish that I would pass back by him later still fully intact. Mingling silently among the wine-sipping crowd, I planned to take an aisle seat in the last row next to the exit. But as I was the last one to enter the theater scene, I found that chair taken by a burly African-American man in his mid-30s, who was just settling into it. I gave him a slightly disappointed look, but being an American, he just smiled and nodded at me. The house was filled with a mix of Europeans, Americans, and Africans. The house manager led me to a seat in the front row at center, where he removed a card printed, "Reserved for playwright." Now everyone knew who I was. Unresolved shame rose out of its repressed dungeon and entered the world through the sweat of my twinging face. Then the play began. Then the audience laughed. Then I was confused. Then they laughed again, a lot. Finally, they applauded. The actors took their final bow. None of this sunk into me as I tried to make a getaway, but my path was blocked by the man who had taken the aisle seat in the back row. He crossed his arms and looked at me, but instead of outrage, this actor from New York smiled and gently offered his hand. He said, "This is a beautiful story, written with love and authority." At first I thought I misunderstood. Seeing my puzzled expression, he repeated the compliment. And with that, my dignity was ransomed back from 'neath the dust upon the shelf within the stack. In the foyer, theater patrons offered friendly and constructive feedback as they sipped sweet Riesling and munched on sour German black bread. Their toes tapped to the fiddle player, the gnome of my wishing well, now moving through the crowd inside. I reached into my bag, pulled out every cent I had, and dropped it into his fiddle case, resting at the cash register. What was impossible to produce 2 decades before was now warmly received by Americans, black and white, in the audience. While many different variables contribute to the change, the most fundamental force for me was the coming of an extremely rare shift in the social call to write that happens once in several hundred years. Any story, even a well-crafted one, will encounter audience block, or in my case, director's block, when it fails to address the pressing social call of its epic. I had submitted the play 20 years too soon. Bite Your Tongue was written for the coming era of postmodernity, one not formally arriving until the early 2010s. It was never a play for the previous era of modernity into which I had submitted it. The first 2 eras of the Western world, born of Europe and its diaspora, have left us deeply wounded in the third. Untreated, that wound moves ever deeper toward the very bones of the West. Our path to healthy recovery must be taken up in the hands of our writers, who are called to bravely and compassionately return us to our glorious and insidious, beautiful and ugly, heavenly and evil past, in their role as skilled metaphysicians.